my very self-directed student.
Thank you. Okay, let's see if that works. Thank you all for being here. Today there are thousands of girls under the age of 16 from southern Peru who have migrated to cities to work as domestic workers. These girls usually go to live with their godmothers or extended family and work as what we would call servants. They cook and clean and take care of the family's children in Cusco. The ones who go to school go at night or once a week. They're usually paid between $20 and $30 a month, if anything at all. They're indigenous, so when they migrate, many only speak Quechua and can't fully communicate with the urban family in Spanish. Their hope and their parents' hope is that they will learn Spanish, finish high school, and ultimately become a professional in Cusco. It rarely works out this way. I first got involved with this issue when I met a family that employs 3 domestic workers between the ages of 10 and 12. These are 2 of the domestic workers here. And when I met them, Viviana had just recently arrived to the city to start work. And as a thank you for taking her in, Viviana's father had brought a lamb from his farm to celebrate. So we sat down to dinner. It was me, 3 domestic workers, the urban family, and Viviana's family, and we were celebrating this kind of arrival to the city, Viviana's arrival to start work. And that's when I said, wait a minute. There's a disconnect between how I see this issue and how Peruvians see this issue. While I pointed to the dangers of mistreatment and abuse, Viviana's father expressed nothing but joy that his daughter had started to work and study in the city. So I thought, what an interesting anthropological study. And I did some preliminary research, and I found that very little has been published on this topic. So I was awarded a Mellon grant, and I went to Peru the following summer, last summer, to answer the question, are these girls improving their lives by migrating to the cities to work as domestic workers? And I first want to just note that although it's illegal to work before the age of 14 in Peru, this issue is not taboo. In fact, families that employ domestic workers talk about it openly, taking in domestic workers from the countryside as a good deed, that they're taking someone in and giving them work. And this issue is so common and open, in fact, that there is a public alley in Cusco where you can go that has a huge job board with postings. And it has an entire section for domestic workers. This is one of the postings for a girl to take care of a family's 3-year-old, and it pays $3 a day. This is so common that it's even part of pop culture. I found this t-shirt at the market that uses a play on words from the job board. Instead of, we need a girl that is cama dentro, live in, or bed inside, as it translates to Spanish, it says, we need a bed with a girl inside. So this not only shows how common the rhetoric around domestic workers is, but also how known it is that many domestic workers are sexually abused. And as I expected to find in my research, I heard a lot of horror stories. I remember I was in the countryside with an NGO that educates families on migrant issues, and this woman who lives in this house ran frantically up to my supervisor and said, "Have you heard anything?" And my supervisor said, "No, I'll tell you if I hear." And it turns out, she told me the story, it turns out that this woman 5 years ago sent her 9-year-old daughter to live with her godmother in Lima to work as a domestic worker. And she was in contact with her daughter regularly over the phone for a few years, and until one day she called and no one picked up. And then she called back and the phone was off. And she hasn't heard from her daughter in 2 years. She has no idea where she lives and no way to find her. During my research, I worked with an organization called Yanapanakusun that has a boarding house for domestic workers who are recovering from mental and physical abuse. They live there until they're 16, at which point they find work for them. And I spoke with the organization's leader, and she was telling me some of the cases that they've had, and she told me that they've had girls as young as 6 years old who had already been working for 2 years. And when they migrate this young, they don't know their birthday. They don't know their last name. They don't know where they're from. And chances are they've lost all contact with their parents. They almost never have documents like their equivalent of a social security number or a birth certificate, and this makes it extremely hard for them to find legitimate work. Many times the only thing girls remember from where they come from is what the mountains in their village look like. And so one of the things that this organization does is go to these mountains and go door to door asking parents if they've lost a child in Cusco and try to reconnect their children to these families. So I was sitting with this leader of this organization, we were talking, and at this point she was chain smoking, and she said, girls that migrate this young call themselves hijas del viento, children of the wind, because they literally have no concept of their identity beyond being a domestic worker. So I heard repeated stories like this one, like the woman who hasn't spoken to her daughter in 2 years. I heard stories of rape, stories of abuse. I heard one story from a girl who accidentally burned the rice one day, and as a punishment, she had to eat the entire pot of 12 cups of burnt rice. And so I was kind of done. I said, you know, I'm going to go back to Middlebury and I'm going to write my thesis on inhumane abuse around this issue. And then I had the opportunity to go to the countryside with a domestic worker and see where she comes from. So this is me looking my absolute best with my headlamp, with a domestic worker in her village. Now, I want you to place yourselves into Alejandra's shoes. Alejandra has 9 children, and she lives at 15,000 feet above sea level, where the land is too dry for anything but potatoes to grow. She speaks only Quechua, and she spends most of her days working on her potato farm with her animals and cooking potato soup for her family in her adobe kitchen. This town may look beautiful to us, but it's hard to express how harsh of an environment it is. In this town, there is no road, no school, no hospital, and no trace of the government. Alejandra's children have to walk an hour and a half to school every morning and back every day, and when the rivers flood in the wet season, they have to take another route that takes even longer. In the winter, it dips below freezing outside. So just imagine 5-year-olds walking an hour and a half in 20-degree weather. So here I am, miserable, walking up to the town in the wet season. And here, this is outside of Alejandra's house, one of her children, and the frozen water tap in the morning. So mothers in the countryside ask me, they say, look at my life, look at what I have. What would you do? What should I do? Should I send my daughter to the city to work? And the answer is, I don't know. But I do have 3 concrete messages that I tell them. I say that they should wait until their daughter is at least 10 and has graduated middle school. That way she'll speak conversational Spanish and know her basic rights. I also say that she should always travel with her documents, so that if anything happens or if they become disconnected, she'll be able to find work. And the last thing I tell that mothers is that they should always, always know where their child is working and visit frequently. But what I don't tell them is that they should not let their daughters migrate, because I have seen success stories. I met this woman, Yolanda, and got to know her very well when I did a documentary on her life that you can now find on YouTube. That was my little pitch. Yolanda has worked almost her entire life as a domestic worker in Bolivia. But with a lot of hard work and luck, she is now the president of one of the domestic worker unions in La Paz. And she's studying to be a lawyer. She also has her own radio show where she speaks about domestic worker issues to domestic workers around the city working, and as they work, they can tune in and listen. And I remember distinctly, as I was sitting in La Paz with her on a park bench, she told me on this park bench, oh no, on the other park bench, last slide, and she said, Elizabeth, I would have never been where I am today if I hadn't migrated from the country, if I had stayed in the countryside. So I leave you with this last slide. This girl's name is Susana, and she is about to graduate middle school. She's 9 years old, and she has an offer from the family in Cusco to work as a domestic worker. Will she stay in contact with her family and ultimately go to school and become a professional in Cusco? Or will she become one of the hijas de bien?